Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Anita Panko, and I am the Environmental Monitoring Supervisor, and I have the privilege this year of supervising the stream cleaning crew. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming to our annual Urban Stream Symposium. This is an excellent opportunity for us to highlight and acknowledge what this year's interns accomplished. Each summer, we hire 8 to 10 interns to walk over half of the 90 miles of streams within city limits. This ensures conveyance and stream health, and with that, the interns are helping to fulfill the components of our federally mandated stormwater permit, as well as the FEMA Community Rating System program that the city participates in to get reduced flood insurance rates for Salem residents. I like to think of the stream cleaning program as a symbiotic relationship. As an organization, we benefit greatly from this program. Over the course of the summer, the interns see more of the city by walking entire sections of the stream than our permanent staff are able to. They come across and document blockages, erosion, infrastructure issues, and illicit discharges that staff and residents who live along the streams might not otherwise see or know about. All this information is collected using ArcGIS Collector, which allows us to have a geographic record of what is happening around the city over time. We ask a lot of our interns as they deal with hot weather, rain, dense vegetation, upset or opinionated homeowners, difficult and slippery terrain, hauling around heavy power tools in the creeks, and picking up soaking wet garbage. In return, I think that interns get to see how a municipal government functions. They learn about safety protocols and get relevant job skills, and they gain experience that transfers very well into future jobs and careers. We also provide an educational component where the interns get to tour different city facilities such as Guerin Island and Willow Lake Wastewater Treatment Plant, and they learn from people in different environmental professions, as well as make connections with people inside and outside our organization. Before I hand it over, I'd like to quickly acknowledge our 2019 stream crew. Sean Friend has done an excellent job as our environmental aide. He willingly relocated to Salem in just under 2 weeks to take this job. He had no prior experience with the stream crew or the City of Salem, and he hit the ground running and has kept the crew organized and on schedule and has helped make this program a huge success. Additionally, we had a small but mighty crew of 8 interns who are excited to be here. They're passionate, they worked hard, and they worked together incredibly well. It's been very rewarding for me to be able to supervise this program and get to know all of the interns, and I know without a doubt that they all go on and have very successful endeavors in their future careers. So without further ado, I'd like to acknowledge Sean Friend, our environmental aide, and invite him up here.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming to the 2019 Urban Stream Symposium for the City of Salem Public Works Department. As Anita mentioned, my name is Sean Friend. I'm the environmental aide for the stream crew. My job is to organize the daily tasks and activities of the stream crew. So what is the stream crew? The stream crew is an internship for college students and recent graduates. We have, currently this year, we have undergraduates, graduate students, and even some recent bachelor's degree recipients. The stream crew is focused on conveyance and stream cleanliness within the city's urban streams. The internship also monitors riparian health and infrastructure for the city. This year's crew, as Anita mentioned, has been a wonderful crew. It's my first year with the city. However, I am confident that this has to be one of the best crews with the city. Starting from the left, in the front row, we have Auburn Walters. In the back, we have David Danner. In the back again, we have Kurt Knott. In the front row by Kurt, we have Mateo Garcia, Nicole Niskanen, Faith Pardini. In the front is Adnan Morkoch, and in the rear is Jay Wilms, along with myself on the side. So a brief history of the stream cleaning program. It was established in 1998 in response to the 1996 flood, which caused over $500 million in damages across the Pacific Northwest, damages to private property, to infrastructure, and to transportation systems and businesses. The internship was initially established as a laborer position, more like a seasonal position rather than an internship. Strictly focused on flood mitigation, and in 2003 it actually evolved into a college internship for the sole purpose of providing a more educated approach to in-stream decision making. As I mentioned before, the original goal was solely conveyance, just flood mitigation. But as time went along, we've been able to expand our goals and our activities in the stream to create a more healthy stream environment. The turn of the century brought broader goals, including the educational requirements, habitat restoration, and stream cleaning and riparian health. And when I say stream cleaning, I mean more on the lines of water quality. Naturally, as time went along, improved stream conditions allowed us to expand our management goals. This is a map of the City of Salem's watersheds. The black border you see in the map is the city boundaries, and everything within city boundaries, with the exception of the far north in Kaiser, the stream crew does inspect and clean. For our current scope of work, the stream crew cleans and inspects 61.5 miles of urban stream within city limits. Conditions of these streams do vary at the time of inspection. It might have been a fairly dry winter where a stream bed may be totally dry where it would normally have water, which would allow possibly some additional vegetation growth to choke out the stream. The flip side of that spectrum is stream may be a bit dammed up. Conditions vary entirely at the time of inspection. The tasks that the stream crew undertakes while in the stream include maintaining stream conveyance, water quality monitoring and maintenance, and documenting stream modifications, and also riparian species monitoring, particularly invasive species monitoring. So for maintaining stream conveyance, that's our #1 goal, and a lot goes into that. The primary methods for maintaining conveyance include debris jam clearing, vegetation clearing, and erosion monitoring. And in this photo kind of encompasses all 3 tasks all in one. You see all this extra debris around the banks. Well, a lot of that debris was collected in the stream, and the crew has removed it. Vegetation clearing, I imagine this area in here looked a lot like it does up here, where the crew has cleared away vegetation for stream flow. And as well as erosion monitoring, as you can see some water flowing over what's known as a head cut here, eroding away at the soil. So I like to think of debris jams as nature's hydromodifier. Debris jams can cause flood risk, excess erosion, and even cause a fish passage barrier. So as you can see in this photo here, we have a natural debris jam. It's a random collection of large logs and sticks that have wedged themselves in either side of the bank of the stream. This presents a flood risk because if it stops up water or even slows the velocity of water, water can back up upstream and possibly spill over some banks further upstream if they are low enough, threatening structures and homes and businesses, or it can overtake culverts that cross underneath roads, causing the water to come up over the road, thus causing a traffic hazard. It can cause excess erosion because if the water needs to force its way through the jam, it might try to find a way around the jam, therefore eroding the soil around the jam to find a way through. And it can cause a fish passage barrier, naturally, as you might think. Not all of the city's streams are utilized as fish migratory routes during spawning season, but some of the larger ones are, and a jam in those streams would prevent the fish from reaching their preferred spawning grounds. So we have 2 types of debris jams that the stream crew clears and documents in the city. We have a natural debris buildup, which is entirely random. It's entirely dependent on how the flow carries the debris downstream or how it may fall from above. And we have beaver dams, which are obviously meticulously put together, very uniquely designed to not give way under any significant water. So the main difference here is that a natural debris buildup is something you would obviously want to clear. If it causes a backup, it could threaten some homes. It's not something we can necessarily leave and feel comfortable about. Whereas a beaver dam, yes, it may present the same problems, it may present the same threats, but we may, in some circumstances, if the conditions are right, we may be able to leave it. So with natural debris buildups, I have some examples here of before and afters. So you can see the build up here, and this is about what it looks like after stream crew comes through, where they make sure all the debris is out of the stream to preserve conveyance. And you can see this debris jam isn't really causing that much of a backup yet. There's still about an even level of water on either side of the jam. However, with one significant rain event, it can just accumulate another little bit of debris and totally back up the water. And you can also see that these banks are fairly short, and it's also fairly short as it comes up over the slope here. So it's not going to take much for this water to come up over the banks. I have another example here. This one, you can't even see through the thicket here. You just see some water right here, and you can't fully tell where the stream goes. But after stream crew comes through, you can see what the natural path of the water would have been. And I'm sure you can imagine that during the winter, in some of our rain events, if the water gets high up to the level of that debris jam, that's going to cause a major backup. With beaver dams, they're not always removed if we can preserve them, if the conditions are right. There are a few criteria we consider when deciding if they are going to be removed or not. At the very least, we do document their existence and their location, previously mentioned by Anita through our ArcGIS collector app. We consider bank height, infrastructure and property at risk, and peak flow during wet season. As I mentioned before, with bank height, if the banks are too short, the water can come up over and threaten some structures. We also think, where is the nearby structures upstream from it, where water would back up to, what's at risk there. And peak flow during wet season helps us know that. If we look back at our historical data on what areas have experienced flooding the most, or what's most susceptible to flooding, it can help us better make a decision on if we even can leave that dam. I have some examples here of a before and after of a beaver dam. So with this one, we know it's a beaver dam because of its overall structure. A natural debris jam, you're going to see some large pieces blatantly available. It's also not going to be so uniform. What's typically been done here is a bigger stick has been placed in the middle here, possibly a few of them, and then mud typically gets packed around it along with more other sticks, so it blocks up the water very well. With this particular jam here, this is a machete sticking out the top, if that gives you a size reference at all. It's a few feet in height, and you can see that we only have another few feet in height of the bank all the way up until it gets through the fence there. So if we left this jam, water would pour over the top during the high water, during the winter time, but it would, because of the water level right now, the water level upstream would just back up higher and higher than it normally would if this beaver dam weren't there during a rain event. After it's cleared, you can see that there's a very significant drop in water level, thus better ensuring that the surrounding structures and transportation systems are going to be safer during the wet season. So I have some data for debris jams that we've cleared in the city this year. We have cleared 117 natural debris jams, and we've at least documented 24 beaver dams. Most of those are either have been removed or are scheduled to be removed. There's a few of them and a few instances that we have been able to leave because of the surrounding area being not anywhere near any structures that would be at risk, or just having plenty of floodplain around it to flood into. I bring up the numbers for the previous year just to show how things can change. The difference in numbers can be a result of many things. It can be the differences in weather. We did have some higher wind this last winter, which could knock some more sticks off of the trees down into the streams. So the unfortunate part is that we've only been documenting the number of debris jams since we started using our ArcGIS collector app, which has only been for a few years now. So our data set is not fully broad enough to analyze this data appropriately to determine, okay, what's the reasoning behind the difference in numbers. But the longer we use this app, the more data we'll collect, and we can help better make better decisions as to how we're going to manage debris jams in the future. As far as the beaver dam disparity, it may just be because there's a higher population of beavers in the city, but it rises and falls, and it's just something we have to monitor so we can make the appropriate decisions in the future. So another component of maintaining conveyance is vegetation clearing. Here you see a photo of one of our crew members clearing out some blackberry around the stream bank. This blackberry, before he was trimming, was all the way over here growing onto this bank. And so if we had left that, this can get down into the water and start choking up the stream. Excess vegetation can cause can catch debris, causing debris jams, and it can also slow the water velocity, both resulting in higher levels of water upstream, threatening infrastructure and businesses and homes just like a debris jam would. I'm sure we all know about how bad blackberry gets. I have some examples of vegetation clearing that the stream crew has done this year. In this picture, it's hard to tell, but there's a channel actually trying to go through here out into a pond. And in the high weather, or in the high water in the wintertime, water is going to get right up here to the top of these banks. This is the top bank here. And all this grass in here would slow the velocity of the water. And the culvert just upstream from this particular spot is rather small, which it may cause the water to then go over the road. So to avoid that, we want to clear this vegetation. And so we clear it down as low as we can to provide plenty of room for the water to flow without velocity being restricted. I have some data for green waste removal within the city, also comparing last year to this year. It's running fairly consistent as it was last year. A lot of this is blackberry and reed canary grass, which both grow incredibly quickly. They spread very quickly. So we're about consistent with where we were last year. However, stream crew is actually not yet finished this year. We actually have a couple weeks left to go, so our number will probably rise from 50. With erosion monitoring, the reason erosion monitoring is important when maintaining conveyance is actually because too much conveyance can actually cause excess erosion. There are a few types of erosion we look for. We document head cuts, which is a sudden drop in stream bed height, where the water is flowing over this little slope down into a pool below it, and as it flows over that slope, it's actually eroding away right there at that slope, and that slope is going to come further and further upstream as time goes on. We also document stream bank erosion. It's exactly like it sounds. Maybe there's an obstacle or a blockage in the middle of a stream causing the water to flow around it, cutting away at the banks. Or maybe there's a sharp curve in the stream where the water is cutting around that sharp curve, digging away at the soil there. Perfect conveyance may result in increased erosion. If we clear every bit of vegetation off of that sharp bank, then it exposes all that soil for water to dig away at it. And if there's a home not far away from that bend, it could get closer and closer to the home, threatening some of their private property. If we lift some of the vegetation along the bank, it'll actually keep it protected to keep the soil more anchored, thus keeping the property a lot safer. So another key task for the stream crew is water quality monitoring. The stream crew observes flowing outfalls, which are pipes that release water into the stream from storm drains on the streets. We particularly document these pipes that have water flowing out of them more than 72 hours after any rain event. As I mentioned, these pipes are fed by the storm drains that you see along the side of the street. So if it's flowing more than 72 hours after a rain event, you know it's because somebody is putting something down those drains that they're probably not supposed to. So we document that, and sometimes it can just be groundwater infiltration. Water's just coming up out of the ground into the pipes, and sometimes it's something innocent. Somebody left a garden hose on, it's just water, but we have to test the chemical composition of it because we have to maintain stream health. As I mentioned, these flowing outfalls are monitored for illicit discharge, which is the improper release of chemicals or fluids into the city's streams. A main component for water quality monitoring is our garbage collection. As you might expect, we're not just going through and ensuring conveyance because there's always cleaning that needs to be done. But the stream crew does handle the majority of the garbage collection within the city. We also report stream modifications, which is where a man-made structure has been put in place to either alter the course or direction of the stream or the flow of the water. So I have some garbage collection since the inception of the stream crew all the way to the present. At its inception in 1998, you can see that we were removing large volumes of trash. These numbers are in pounds. You can see in 1999, at the peak of garbage collection, we removed 97,467 pounds of trash from the city's urban streams. To date, we only removed 5,114. This could be because of a number of things. I like to think that conditions are getting better. thus resulting in less trash to pick up. But I also acknowledge that there are other departments within the Public Works, there are other divisions within the Public Works Department that have taken on more responsibility for trash cleanup. So these are simply numbers that stream crew themselves have removed over the years. But we have been on a downward trend the last several years. So I wanted to show this table showing this year's garbage collection broken down by watershed. I have the 7 different major watersheds that stream crew inspects within city limits, the total square mileage of that watershed, and how many pounds of trash we've pulled out of there. Naturally, Claggett and Mill are our hardest hit trash collection areas, whereas Little Pudding, with it only being 5 pounds, it's mainly removing green waste and vegetation as the reed canary grass grows up very quickly and very abundantly through there. So with stream modifications, as I mentioned, it's where a man-made structure will, of any kind will alter the stream in any way. So the type of modifications we typically look for are stream damming and in-stream pumps. These can modify the stream habitat and the conditions of the stream by slowing water velocity. If it's a dam, it pools up water in front of it, and it releases less water downstream. It can also reduce water levels downstream, as I mentioned. A dam would also potentially overwhelm the culvert upstream, just like a natural debris jam would. At least a natural debris jam is something we can easily monitor and remove on a yearly basis. A man-made structure is a bit different. We would have to either try to consider making a change to that structure or changing the way we maintain that particular stream if it's something that we can leave. And as for pumps, though, it's just a matter of removing water from the stream, which we want to leave present for any wildlife that's utilizing that resource. So I have some examples of some of the modifications we look for. This is a man-made dam. You can see there are rocks here, and there are also sandbags that have been placed down. It has pooled up this water in here. And one thing we have to do is, one main reason we document their existence is because we have to weigh the pros and cons of them being there. The con is obviously this is stopping up a lot of water, preventing a lot of water from flowing downstream. But the pro is it actually has created wildlife habitat in this pool here. At the time that this was inspected, several fish species were spotted in that pool. So there are pros and cons that we have to consider when deciding how we are going to maintain this particular section of stream. That's why it's important for us to document this. And here's some examples of some pumps found in streams. They come in all different, many shapes and sizes, different appearances. We just don't necessarily want people taking water from the stream. So the final main task of the stream crew is to monitor riparian species, particularly invasive species. There are some negatives of having invasive plant species on a riparian corridor. They can reduce habitat diversity. They can result in fewer animal species. As the habitat becomes far less diverse, there are fewer animals that can utilize that resource, fewer sources of food for these animals. And they can also cause an overall reduction in productivity even within the stream if an invasive aquatic plant species starts taking over and might outcompete some in-stream resources from, let's say, fish or tadpoles. Reestablishment of native species will preserve the diversity and productivity of the riparian corridor. That is something that the Stormwater Quality Department does try to do. They try to preserve the native species along a riparian corridor, and stream crew helps out in any way they can. So overall, the benefit of having the stream cleaning crew is flood mitigation, water quality preservation, and riparian zone preservation. Thank you all for listening to my presentation. I encourage you all to enjoy the next 3 presentations we have by our stream crew members. We have Invasive Species in Urban Streams, presented by Nicole Niskanen. We have Flowing Outfalls and Illicit Discharges, presented by Jay Wilms. And we have Erosion in Urban Streams, presented by Faith Pardini. I'd like to now welcome Nicole Niskanen up.
Hello, so I'm Nicole Niskanen, and I'm going to be presenting invasive species in urban streams. So to start, kind of like a little connection, this is just a picture of just high vegetative, like overgrowth. And if you think about in winter months, you don't want to go maintain your yard and you look out one day and you see something kind of like this. It's kind of what invasives do. If they're not maintained and monitored over a given period of time, they'll overtake an area, which can decrease biodiversity and cause a bunch of other environmental and ecological impacts to a given location that they're in. So in this presentation, I'll be covering what invasives are, some of the invasive species that we've encountered in the streams, how they shape the landscape, and some repercussions that they might have in those landscapes. Also, like some monitoring and managing options and methods that are potentially in place for different types of invasive species. So invasives are considered non-native to an ecosystem and whose introduction to an area could be harmful or disruptive to native plants or other species, and they could have arrived at an area by accident, or most of them are intentionally brought over for different factors. And they can cause, as I mentioned earlier, different environmental ecological impacts, such as decreasing like plant or animal biodiversity, so outcompeting native plants. Some of them can decrease water quality or clogging waterways and streams. And then also it's important that we monitor, manage, and treat them so that we can protect and preserve our native plants and animals and other species. Some of the local invasives that we've encountered and that are around the Salem area are Ludwigia hexapetala, also known as water primrose, reed canary grass, as Sean had mentioned earlier, which I'll briefly be going over. Then we have yellow flag iris and knotweed. There's two different types of knotweed. And then purple loosestrife. So Ludwigia hexapetala, or water primrose, it was originally or first noticed in 1940 on a side channel of the Willamette River near Corvallis. Its main environmental impact, it degrades water quality. It has their rhizonomous root systems, which means the roots grow horizontally or laterally, which can, as you see in those bottom two images, that's just some Ludwigia that's significantly clogging those waterways. They're very well adapted. You can see those little offshoots. I don't know what the laser pointer is. These little root systems here, they come to the surface to get oxygen to the water. So if there's a ton of water and whatnot, they still can maintain oxygen to their leaves and whatnot. So this is an image. I've got two images. They're 4 years apart, the Delta Ponds in Eugene. Before and after treatments, so this is in 2013, and then 4 years later, resulting image of effective treatment and monitoring and maintaining the Ludwigia. And you can clearly see it opens that waterway and that channel up quite a bit. A lot more native animals, birds, and plants can thrive. Also, it could be used recreationally, more heavily recreationally used in a waterway. You can't kayak through that huge clustering of Ludwigia. So reed canary grass, this was nationally promoted actually as a forage crop, and it doesn't provide a negative impact for reed canary grass. It has very weak stems, so nesting birds and other animals, it collapses and it can't really support them. It's pretty difficult to contain because there's a lot of seeds. It spreads via seed propagation. So it's everywhere, and it's very difficult to contain a bunch of grass that spreads very quickly. And then yellow flag iris. This one's a really cool one because it was brought over intentionally to the U.S. For two different purposes. One, for actually helping stabilize and reduce erosion, so erosion control. As I had mentioned, those rhizonomous roots, they grow into the banks and can help hold those banks from collapsing in and cutting back closer to properties. Another reason it was brought over was actually for increasing water retention in sewage treatment ponds. This plant also, it spreads, that's a seed pod there, so it spreads via seeds, and it doesn't really have any predators because the rhizomes, they're toxic to micro and macro vertebrates, so that it doesn't have anything to restrict its outgrowth. It also has a toxic sugar derivative in the stems in those rhizomes. So knotweed, there's two different types. There's giant knotweed and then Japanese knotweed. Both of the knotweeds, actually Japanese was the one that we most commonly found in our streams and documented. Yellow flag iris and knotweed are both the common invasives that will be treated. Yellow flag iris, mechanical treatment is generally the way that we go with that. So that includes hand cutting, pulling, tilling, covering, that kind of thing, physical labor. Knotweed is a similar thing. However, knotweed's a little more tricky because just 1 centimeter fragments can sprout and become new plants. So if you're using tilling and cutting and you miss a little piece, then you have a bunch of knotweed that's just going to keep on propagating. Another treatment method for knotweed, that bottom right image, is stem injections, which is very tedious and isn't necessarily the go-to method. So there's stem injections and then cut stem and wick. And is that top image, you can see just how large, that's giant knotweed. It kind of has a heart shape. Japanese knotweed is that middle leaf on the top right. It's more of a shield shape, so it's got flat and not quite as large, but they're both very, very large plants. Negative impact with knotweed is the leaves have very little nutrient value. So native plants and little bugs that'll feed on them when they're huge. So when they produce leaf litter and they're falling, they're not going to provide any sort of nutritional benefit to any of the native plants and species. And then purple loosestrife is one of my favorites because not only I think it's really cute, but it was brought over one of two ways, intentionally for beekeeping, so bees love it. And then the seeds, they're very adhesive, so it also could have been brought over accidentally by sticking to shipping freight. It sticks to boots, just fauna, other animals. It grows alongside generally with cattail, native cattail. Negative impact with this, it decomposes very rapidly in the fall, and native cattail decomposes in the spring. So there's a very large nutrient flush when these rapidly decompose in the fall, and it can throw off and jeopardize native species by changing the timing of that nutrient flush, which can be problematic. So it's really important for invasives that we detect them early, and then our next steps with early detection is evaluating if they need to be removed or to contain or potentially eradicate. But those containment steps, they're situational, so you're not just going to go out and go gung-ho at taking something that's pretty mild or that is being maintained and documented. But it's really important that we understand these are plants that are adapting very well to these environments, so making sure that we're recognizing these aren't bad plants, they're not weeds, they're well-adapted plants that may be outcompeting our natives. So to preserve our native species, we need to maintain documentation of them and just keeping an eye on them and taking steps that we need to take to preserve our native species. So I just want to give a thank you to Gray Wolf, Sean Friend, and everyone on Stream Crew for helping me with the presentation and for providing an amazing educational opportunity and experience throughout the summer. I'd like to pass it over to Jay, and he's going to be talking more about outfalls and continuing on with the presentations to come.
Good afternoon, everybody. Again, I am Jay Wilms, and I will be presenting on dry weather outfall inspections and illicit discharges. We'll start with a few definitions, just so we can provide a little clarity on what all those terms mean when put together. Dry weather, as defined by our purposes, is a period of 72 hours where there has been no measurable precipitation. An outfall is an outlet of a collection of water into an urban waterway. We'll see some examples later on in the slide. And an illicit discharge is any form of discharge into an urban waterway that is not entirely made up of stormwater. So anything that makes its way in there, if it didn't come from our stormwater or from storm events, shouldn't be going through those channels. We'll move on to why we care about flowing outfalls during dry weather. So during dry weather, flowing outfalls will be indicative of potential issues. It could be a sign that we're getting cross connection between our sanitary sewer systems and our storm sewer. Our storm sewers will absorb some of material around it. We want to make sure that that is not of that variety. It could be a sign of damaged water supply line. If that is leaking, we certainly want to know, as that infrastructure would need to be addressed and maintained. Could be a carryover from a secondary source. That's a kind of a wide term for anything that could be placed on a roadway, or it could be collected into a catch basin and put into our urban streams. And it could be a direct illicit discharge into as mentioned before, into a stormwater catch basin. Something that oftentimes could be unknowingly put into our urban streams without the consent or without the direct input from our authority. And why do we? This is just an example of a broken pipe over an urban stream. This was not collected during our 2019 stream crew. It just kind of shows what we could see in the field that we would notate as an illicit discharge. If this was a water main, we wouldn't want to be putting the added chlorine that is in our water distribution system into our urban waterways. And likewise, if this was a sanitary sewer line, we can all imagine what would be going into the creek at that point, and indeed, nobody wants that. From this information, we can determine a root cause and corrective action for these matters. We can repair damaged infrastructure, if that is indeed the issue. We perform pipe shed investigations to locate sources of any kind of infiltration. And we can identify the material, source, and the extent of any illicit discharge if that is what it is determined to be. Moving on to some of the impacts of flowing outfalls. A small impact that they can provide is they would provide a small change in the stream flow volume. Why that would be an issue is that can contribute to a little bit of accelerated bank and bed erosion, as well as, it's just adding to the amount of water which is being pushed through our urban streams, and that can increase the flooding potential during our wet weather conditions. In this image, what we've got is an outfall, but underneath the sheddy part, kind of near where that machete is, you can see that there is damage to the infrastructure, and it's pouring out all over the edge of the stream bank, and so it is providing with a little bit of erosion on that portion of the stream bank. The more it cuts there, the more the natural stream has something to grab onto and can pull it apart even worse. Beyond the physical impacts, we have changes to stream chemistry. Typically, a lot of these changes would be to the temperature, the pH, the turbidity levels, conductivities, and chlorine. We would also see potential impacts in amount of coliforms and bacteriological impacts to those waterways as well. So ecological impacts from those changes in chemistry would be effects that we have to our flora and fauna. A lot of the macroinvertebrates don't respond well to changes in their environment. If we have changes in temperature, a lot of the species that live in there are very temperature dependent. They cannot tolerate changes in that. If there's a change in the chlorine level, again, they're adapted to live in a certain environment. When we change that environment, the impacts occur. aesthetics are affected. That's a pretty simple one. We've all seen discoloration to our waterways, either in images or if something's been put in there, just, it'll absorb that color or it'll take on the characteristics of what you put in. And that's usually a very strong red flag to residents and those who use our waterways. And of course, when it's impactful enough, the costs for remediation of these issues is quite high in most instances, because we're doing reparations to the banks, to the beds, and we have to do continuing monitoring to these areas to make sure that the remediations are effective. This is just an image. This was collected from stream crews of years past. You can see an outfall up there, and it's discharging down into the creek. And I believe it was found that there was some paint that had been dumped into a catch basin and flowed into the creek, making its mark on the waterway. And I'm not sure how long that stuck around, but that was discovered by the stream crew and properly mitigated. So the functions of the stream crew's role in the outfall inspections start with an observation of the physical characteristics. When we come upon them, the first thing we would generally take a look at is, what size of an outfall are we looking at? City-maintained outfalls are 6 inches or larger, and those are the ones that gather our priority. We would observe the material. Going from left to right here in these photos, we have a metal outfall, a plastic one, and one made of concrete. And then we would want to assess the condition. Is there any physical damage or degradation that's going to require attention? And of course, we need to see if there is flow present during the dry weather season. And if flow is present during the dry season, we would estimate the amount of flow, estimate its volume. We assess the physical appearance. We look for anything that would give us any indication as to what the source might be and collect that data. Note any odor. We test for the presence of chlorine using some field test strips, which I'll walk you through in the next slide or two. And all of that information we collect and record in the data collector, which we had mentioned earlier. It's got the inputs for basically all of these bullet points for us to give that information along to permanent staff for further consideration. This is one of the chlorine test strips that we would use in the field. You'd pull the strip out of its little package, which very handily has its it's got the reading color changes on it, and you would just line it up with that, and that data would get recorded into our data collection system. And the way you would use the strip would just be to run it under the flowing outfall for a given period of time, and then line it up and see what you've got. Most often than not, and luckily for us, things look like this where there was no detections. What happens to a flowing outfall and illicit discharge data collected by stream crew? Again, this data is reviewed by the permanent staff to do a number of things. We would then determine if further testing is to be conducted. We would want to identify the source of the flow. And from those, we would have the potential initiation of our environmental response team if we felt that the impacts were great enough. So that is presentation on the effects of flowing outfalls and illicit discharges as we handled them this year. Again, I would like to thank the City of Salem for the opportunity to be on the stream crew. As an environmental professional prior to re-entering the classroom, this has been a very beneficial experience for me. I learned a lot, and I would support any student with environmental interest to pursue this as an educational opportunity, as well as to get to know public systems and understand how an environmentalist role is played into a government system. So thank you very much, and I will pass the next presentation along to Faith Pardini, who will be discussing stream bed and stream bank erosion.
Hi there, I'm Faith Pardini. I'm going to be talking to you guys about some erosion today and the interaction we have between erosion and our urban streams. Now, streams are always going to be products of the basins they reside in. They're dynamic systems and always in a constant state of change, as water's looking for the lowest energy point possible and the most efficient way to get there. Water will stop at nothing in its path to achieve this goal. Us at the City of Salem Stream Crew see these dynamic systems and their changes hands-on, and we visit these sites yearly to monitor the changes, namely the erosion that takes place. Stream Crew has done annual inspections of dozens of Salem's urban streams since the late 90s, and for over 20 years we have been the first eyes to see and document any erosional changes that may impact the city and its citizens alike. All the erosion we note, whether it be head cuts or stream bank erosion, such as cut banks and undercutting, over time paint a comprehensive map of how the stream wants to move in the most efficient way possible. Streams unaltered to fit the human and urban existence and experience look something similar to this. And here we can see how it evolves and how the water is just moving downstream in the most efficient way possible, sometimes cutting away then meeting back up in order to just preserve that constant energy flow. Now, erosion occurs in the most stable streams, albeit at a slower and sometimes smaller pace. But the significant erosional issues tend to arise when municipalities and hydrology collide. For we must alter the path that the water wants to take in order to preserve city function, whether it be our current boundaries we have, our property lines, or even to just ensure mobility throughout the city. Now, by removing vegetation, adding more infrastructure, changing the natural drainage patterns, and straightening streams, these are all things that are necessary to grow a city, but are all things that cause a stream to erode more. Therefore, it's of utmost importance to document erosion changes to preserve the function of our city, to keep our citizens safe, and to protect private property. Altering the path the stream wants to take ultimately causes the stream to erode in places where it usually wouldn't if the human interaction hadn't occurred. And by tracking this erosion, we're better able to predict the changes that will occur in the channel morphology later on. This is important because if we don't track erosion, if we don't keep track of it as it approaches onto property lines, this creates a huge financial burden. Because every head cut and cut bank has the potential to grow into something much more dangerous and much more costly later on the road if it's not monitored and controlled right now. Some of these cut banks and erosions might seem harmless and hazardous and benign, but by leaving it to its own devices without monitoring and without documenting it, we risk something like this turning into something like this after a flood event or multiple flood events. Tracking erosion is becoming increasingly important as the climate's changing to bring more water into our Willamette Valley. Our basins simply aren't fit to hold this much water as we're expecting, and in turn we're getting more flood events. And with flood events causing more erosion, it is becoming more and more crucial to track and document the erosional changes we are seeing to prevent them from wiping away more banks. For it only takes a few large flood events to turn something like this into something like this. Tracking erosions and seeing the first signs of erosion early prevents all of these catastrophic events from happening in the first place. Not only is tracking erosion the smarter financial decision, it's the safest decision if we want to preserve the safety and prominence of our riverfront and stream-adjacent properties here in Salem. Now, the Stream Crew tracks and reports on two main types of erosion, and they occur on the stream bed and stream bank. The main erosional force in urban streams, in mainly valley streams, is called scouring, which is the direct removal of bank materials by the physical action of the flowing water. Now, bank erosion occurs from multiple ways. There's cut banks that can form on the outside of meanders as the higher energy flow carves away on the turn. They can be caused by blockages like debris jams, where water is diverted from something and scours away on the other sides. There can be undercutting, which is where direct removal of material comes from under the banks when they're highly vegetated. But the most extreme form of bank erosion we usually see follows head cuts, which Sean talked about earlier, where the water falls down from a higher point, kind of creates a punch bowl, then eventually migrates upstream. And this causes a deeply incised channel, which causes the water to be directed into it. It can't come out onto the floodplains and diffuse that energy, so instead it carves deeper down and creating a deeper, more channelized flow. Now, here at the Stream Crew, we marked all counts of stream bank erosion that were essentially longer than 25 feet or about the length of a house, and we marked all stream bed erosions that could prevent a fish from traveling upstream. Now, by show of hands, how many of you guys are familiar with ArcGIS like Collector, Quick Capture, Survey 123? Awesome, good, so I won't have to go too in detail for y'all. So we used Collector to collect all of our data, essentially. In this, it's really useful because it puts the location data to everything we see in the field onto a map so the permanent staff can see exactly what we're looking at. We used Collector specifically to track our bed erosion, in which we would take photographs and determine if it was stable or unstable, if it was high, medium, or low. Then for bank erosion, we would use an app called Quick Capture, which I really enjoyed because you were able to select a feature, walk the entire length of the stream of the erosion you saw, deselect that feature, and it would translate that information directly onto our maps. All this data was uploaded in real time and had access to everybody who had access to the Stream Crew Data Collection 2019 map. After our data points are uploaded, they're reviewed by permanent staff. This year we accounted for 20 counts of stream bed erosion and 8 counts of significant stream bank erosion. Most of these we actually saw in West Salem and South Salem, where we see more hilly topography. And I think that's because with the higher gradients you get more higher flows with more energy behind them and more velocity, so it carves more in there. And after the data points are uploaded and analyzed by the permanent staff, if the erosion that we have documented has the potential to cause harm to city or civilian property, it can become a photo point. Now, these photo points are places where we monitor yearly to check all the erosion that takes place. We use a 360-degree camera. We used a GoPro Fusion, in which we go into the stream, put it in the middle, and take a point, and it gives us a comprehensive view of everything in around the area. So you look up, down, to your side, everywhere around us, you can see that all that information would be recorded in our 360-degree photos. This is really important because it essentially creates a huge data pool which we can use to make decisions and inferences how to best predict the erosional changes and how to best treat them in the future. For it's much easier to mitigate something and cheaper to mitigate something than it is to remediate some of these issues that arise. Now I'm just going to show you guys some of the photos we took for this after I show you the map we used to do this. So over here, we've got part of our Stream Crew Data Collection 2019 map. The features I have highlighted on here, we've got the teardrop shapes are our fish passage barriers. The blue ones are man-made, the green ones are natural. Here we can see erosion on the banks after these points where the material's kind of scoured away. We've got little things like this. Those are our stream bed erosion, our head cuts. And those range from blue to red, and that describes the severity, whether they are stable or unstable, and how tall and big essentially they are. Around here, we also have little cameras around here. These are our photo points, and these are locations throughout the city where we visit and take those 360-degree photos of where there's erosion we are particularly interested in. And over here on the left, we have a picture of how our stream bank erosion is tracked on the map. There's 8 points on that big map, but you can't really see them because they're about shorter than 100 feet in length, though it doesn't really transfer onto the big map view. But you can kind of see this is an area I worked over on Reed Road. This is West Fork Middle Pringle Creek, and that was just a big cut bank we saw, and it just kind of translated and transferred down about 100 feet through there. And here's some photos we took for Collector. Now, we don't use photos to track our stream bank erosion. We use it to track our stream bed erosion. So I couldn't get many pictures of some cut banks for you guys, but I got some pictures of some head cuts. So on the far left, we have a picture of Auburn Walters at a head cut in Glen Creek. Now, usually we don't have measuring tools on us while we're trudging through the stream, so we got to use what we can for reference for size. So here we used Auburn as our size reference there. We have in the middle, he's measuring a head cut using a potato rake. This is a particularly large one in Turnage Brook. And you can see him again on the right this time, measuring one of the smaller ones with a machete. Now, these are some of the 360-degree photos we took for the photo points. Now, these might be a little confusing to wrap your head around, but just again, imagine that all these things we see here is just everything you see around you compressed onto a two-dimensional image. This is one we took over in, I believe this was Pringle Creek over in southeast Salem. This is a particularly large head cut. It was about up to my shoulder over my head. It's incised very far into the channel. And here's another one in Turnage Brook. This is actually about a block away from my house. And you can see the head cut over to the left with our measuring rod next to it. You can see there actually might have been another one before and the stream was rerouted. There looks to be like another punch bowl behind there. And here, I'm gonna actually try to get you guys a comprehensive view of what our permanent staff sees in these 360 photos and how crucial they are just for our understanding and monitoring of these erosions. You can see we can kind of squish around and see just all the changes that have happened. It's like we're standing in the streams ourselves. And I think this is really helpful and crucial just for our understanding of erosion and our monitoring of it and understanding of how we can best treat it and fix it in the future. Awesome. Yeah. And last but not least, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all the permanent staff I worked with this summer. Brandon, Brian, Kat, all you guys up in Stormwater. I'd like to give a big thank you to Pete and Justin for their help and work with me this summer in determining on how I can see these changes that might occur in the stream just with my own two eyes instead of a fancy app. And I'd like to give a big thank you to Sean Friend this summer for his excellent guidance. The stream crew could not have done it without him. And last but not least, a huge thank you to all the stream crew members on this. Our dedication to stream cleanliness has been incredible to work with. This has truly been the most impactful chapter of my education. I look forward to continuing it forward, and I'm very happy to come and visit the stream crew next summer. Thank you very much.
This presents the conclusion of the Urban Stream Symposium. I want to thank you all for coming. I also wanted to give a few thank yous to people who really deserve it. First of all, to the permanent staff members that have helped out stream crew along the way. Anita Panko, our supervisor, Justin Boyington, our flow monitoring analyst, and program coordinators Peter Dowenpool and Gray Wolf. You have all been such a wonderful help to stream crew this summer. It would not be possible without your guidance and without your assistance, so thank you. And I also want to give a special thanks to the entire stream crew of 2019. You guys have been an amazing crew this year. We wouldn't have been able to accomplish everything we have so far without your help, and so thank you to each and every one of you. And also a special thanks to the City of Salem Public Works Department for not just giving myself this opportunity, but giving everybody in the stream crew this wonderful opportunity to broaden our horizons and look forward to a bright future in stormwater management. So thank you. And the entire stream crew that is presented today will still be around for questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you all for coming.